Would it take an alien attack on all of mankind for us to finally find unity in our survival? Well, guys, we're going to talk about that today as we discuss the 1996 film Independence Day, directed by Roland Emmerich. Am I saying the name right, Kevin?
It's Emmerich.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm Joshua
I'm
Noel.
pretty sure. Yeah, but yeah.
I am not the best with the names, and I'm not the best with opinions. You know, I'm known as Josh with the wrong opinions around here, and I am joined though by someone with excellent opinions. Kevin with the perfect opinions is here with me today.
We'll
Kevin
see about
Schaefffer.
that, but yes. But what's up, Joshua?
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Well, hey, instead of doing what we're geek out on our primarily political episodes, we like to start by identifying a bad actor in politics, whether real, from the Bible, fiction, whatever. And then at the end of the show, we'll identify a good actor in politics to leave on a better note. Did you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I can.
Okay.
Mine is very common, I would say, when you think of bad television fiction, but also one of my favorite characters in all fiction for me. But Lex Luthor is my go-to, just because.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's different versions, but especially listeners of the show know that I've been watching Smallville all year for the first time, and I absolutely love Michael Rosenbaum's portrayal, and especially because now I'm getting to the point where he's turning to the villain side, and I just saw one of the best episodes, which was Lexmas, where he is it has this dream of what his life could be if he went the more noble path. And then you see a reason why he doesn't go that route. He's one of the most fascinating characters in comics. I love the Christopher Reeve Superman films, but I think of course Gene Hackman is great, but the only thing there is he's a little cartoonish, in his portrayal. What I like about Rosenbaum's and Clancy Brown's in the animated universe, and then in the comics is there's this really fascinating allure to him where, yes, he is power hungry, but he also has this side of him where, in Smallville especially, he wants everything that Clark wants, like a stable family life and love and everything, but he's also terrified of losing the people closest to him, and that's why he has trouble with attachments. But he makes for a perfect political, charismatic villain, and so has always been one of my favorite villains in all of pop culture. I mean, not one to admire, but certainly one that is fascinating.
Oh yeah. My favorite Lex moments, I think, are when he actively is doing charity or something to help the community. Because it's one of those where you're like, wait a minute, what? And it's he paints this picture of trying to get everyone to see what he sees, air quotes, where he's no one should have this much power. Superman's the bad guy. And he does, sometimes he does a really good job of painting that picture. And you're like, oh man.
Yeah, it's a compelling argument. Yeah.
Man, yeah. For me though, I'm going to go, this is a little bit weird probably, but
no, go ahead.
Disenchantment, the show, King Zog. King Zog is who I'm going to go with my pick for a bad political actor. He has a fun character arc in that show where he starts off and he's just all about himself and everybody in the town's miserable because he makes all the rules. He is terrible to everybody because he doesn't care about anyone but himself. And come the end of the series, he has a whole character arc where he gets better and stuff, but he actually realizes he's a terrible king. So he lets his daughter be queen because he's like, I'm bad at this. And I love his story arc, and I love that it wasn't, once he became a good person, all of a sudden he's good at politics. They were like, no, he's still bad at it. He just learned to recognize that.
Ooh, good pick. I like it.
That's fun. That's a good one. Yeah. That's also a great show. I enjoy that show a lot. But today we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about Independence Day. But first, I want to let everybody know you can, if you want to avoid smashing Will's heart, you can smash that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You got to do one or the other. If you don't smash it, you're smashing Will's heart. If you do smash it, Will's going to be happy the whole rest of the day. He's going to skip and frolic around in fields of daisies if you smash that like and subscribe button. So do that.
We'll film him doing that for proof. But.
Yeah. I would love that. If we get If we can get a video with 50 likes, we will film Will frolicking through a field of daisies and
I
post
think
that video.
that's
Yeah.
probably like the best reward you could give people.
Yeah. I like how I'm promising something for Will to do.
I think he would say yes,
He
though.
would. He would.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, if you're on your laptop, podchaser.com, rate and review us there. That helps the algorithms with people finding us. If you're not on your laptop, you're listening on an app. If you're listening on Spotify, there's a little 3 dots at the top of the episode or our show where you can hit that and hit rate this podcast and rate us there. Apple Podcasts, you can scroll down to the bottom of the description and rate and review there as well. All of that helps people find the show, so we appreciate it. Another way people support the show is financially, either on Captivate, Patreon, or Apple Podcast again. And, that just helps us keep the lights on, upgrade our equipment, pay for hosting servers, YouTube things, all that stuff. And one of our supporters, Aaron Hardy, is only getting a shout out today, but next time it could be you if you choose to support the show on one of those platforms. So think about it. And also, one last thing, you can listen to other primarily political episodes. There's a link down below in the description where you can find all of this whole series of all the different episodes where we've talked about politics and our favorite fandoms, and just enjoy it. But today's, I would say, is probably one of the less political ones of the series, which is kind of weird because the movie we're reviewing is Independence Day, but it's really just like an action film that borrowed the name to get the hype of the holiday.
It is, but it also, I don't know. I'm prepared to talk about some interesting themes there.
Yeah.
Like for a giant B movie, we have some good questions to look at here.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we're jumping into this episode talking about this film, and this was a fun one. Big action film, and I've heard it said that there was never a movie like it before this time, and there hasn't really been one since this time. And I'm not sure. Like, I've been thinking about it, trying to see what they mean. Maybe because a lot of the times when you have like big global threat movie, it's still very localized, right? Like Avengers, what I was thinking of. It's like the whole world's threatened, but everything's really happening in New York. But this film actually does showcase, like, it is the whole world. So I thought that's a unique aspect. I'm not sure, other than that, what really makes it so much different, but I won't say it's not different because it does stand out in like the history of film. People always point to this one.
It does really have, like, I think, a quality about it that, like I said, it's a giant B movie, but it's a B movie with a budget. Like, it's very much a love letter to that era of 1950s flying saucer movies. But it's on a much grander scale, and it's very mainstream, and it has this big ensemble cast. So I think that's where it had. And you're right in that, I mean, I just saw Quiet Place Day One, and like that, takes place in New York, and New York gets destroyed so many times in apocalypse movies. But this one is one that does more of a global look at, an alien invasion. I mean, there you have, World of Worlds, and I mean, there are others, but I agree, it does have a uniqueness for that alone.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking World War Z kind of does that too.
World War Z does, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think some of the difference too, though, is like World War Z was based on books and stuff. I don't think Independence Day was really based. I think it was just an original story.
It's an original script. Like that, very much a love letter to a specific era of sci-fi movies. But it was co-written by Roland Emmerich, and then I'd have to look up the other writer. But it was not an adaptation.
Yeah. So for those listening who somehow have never seen Independence Day, Kevin, what is the plot of this film? What's this movie about?
Aliens invade a bunch of humans from all over the world who we meet in different. We get a computer geek played by Jeff Goldblum. We get a military hero played by Will Smith. The president played by Bill Pullman. And a bunch of supporting characters. Cousin Eddie is, of course, in here too, which I like. I actually, because it had been years since I've seen this, actually, I kind of totally forgot that Randy Quaid was in this, and I'll talk about that too. But more sprawling cast there. So Jeff Goldblum's character quickly becomes the one to see what's happening when science starts upon, like, the skies start to turn, and he knows that an imminent threat is approaching and is trying to get to the White House. His kind of like estranged wife is secretary, or like, forget what her guy. She's in the president's cabinet. I forget exact position, but he's trying to get to her and warn everyone. And then the aliens blow up like New York, DC, just like massacre a bunch of cities, which I'll get to the interesting tone of the movie in a bit. But that happens, things escalate, and then eventually they also find out that Area 51 is a thing, and none other than Brent Spiner is the scientist leading that charge, and so they've been, secretly analyzing aliens for a while. The plot continues to escalate, and I think my favorite thing about it is how they defeat the aliens. So Jeff Goldblum sends a computer virus to the aliens to disable their defense systems, and then Cousin Eddie drives his ship through the rear end of the mothership, sacrificing himself and destroying the mothership. And then Will Smith also gives a big dogfight and helps Goldblum to defeat the rest. That's a very like condensed version, but it does kind of encapsulate the pretty ludicrous plot of it all for an alien invasion movie. But like you said, it takes place on a global scale. We meet a bunch of different characters from all over the world and in different places, and then they come together at the end. And Bill Pullman gives a classic, iconic. This is why it's such a July 4th movie, is because he gives this like roaring speech before a crowd of survivors saying like, this is not just an American holiday, it's our Independence Day, as we fight not against tyranny and oppression, but for our survival. And he gets the crowd going, and they save humanity.
Man, there's so much packed in that. So I've been like studying the film a little bit the last couple of days, just because.
Yeah.
Well, really, usually I'm not a film buff like Kevin. So usually I'll look up a movie a little bit and be like, okay, cool. This is why they made the movie. And I'll just move on with my life. This one had enough interesting, just like tidbits surrounding the making of the movie that I was like, actually curious. Like I actually wanted to learn more about it. I think one of my favorite things, because you're talking about the big speech of, and that's like, I think that's like the iconic moment of this film. Like everybody remembers the speech of Independence Day. And what's so crazy is it wasn't really scripted. So,
and I can see that too. But yeah,
it was. So originally, the president wasn't going to be just a good guy. They were going to have him be bad and kind of turn good throughout the movie. So the original envision, they had Kevin Spacey's who they wanted for the president, and then thankfully that didn't work out.
They got Lone Star instead.
Yeah. Thankfully that didn't work out. They got Lone Star. They got Bill Pullman to do it, and they realized he doesn't work as someone who was kind of a jerk that becomes better. He's actually just kind of good. So we're going to like make the character around the actor. So they rewrote the parts, and they forgot to write the speech. The way the story goes, they forgot to write the speech. At the day of filming, the director tries to rush over there to write it real quick, because on the script, all he just put a placeholder. So he just put asterisk, cool ass speech. That's all that was there. So Bill Pullman goes up and just delivers this.
Killed it. Yeah.
And supposedly he had been like, he got a CD collection of the top 100 speeches in the world, and he just been listening to it, and he was like, all right. It just got up there and did that.
I love it.
And that was the first take. That was the first take. They just were like, yep, he did it. That's all we needed.
What's really funny is that you mentioned like his character, trying to, like, they had like an arc in mind for him. And at the beginning of the movie, they say his ratings are really down. A lot of people are unhappy. And I was trying to figure out, like, why do they not like him? Because he's like kind of the ideal. I mean, like, he, like, in his personal life, he's a great father and husband, and like he's a veteran. So at the end of it, he joins the fight with them. And like, I mean, maybe he just had some political stress, and there is like some conflict within his cabinet. And I was like, why is he? He seems like the perfect leader to. He's someone I would follow against an alien invasion. Like, yeah,
I'd be glad to have him there.
Yeah.
And then also, what's crazy is the directors always wanted the movie to be called, I think, I know that at least they did want it to be called Independence Day, and they kept pitching it, and Fox kept being like, no, no one's going to want to watch that. We got to come up, they kept turning it down. And it wasn't till they had this speech, they sent the film of the speech in to Fox. And then Fox said, okay, we can call it Independence Day. And I'm like, all right, he did it. He named the film in speech. It was
I
perfect.
do. Isn't it great though? There's so many stories of that where like there's so much studio pushback. They're like, this is never going to sell. People are never, and those are the ones that become like the most popular movies and most embraced culturally.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the other thing the studio did and this actually really shocked me because this is 1996, and in my mind, ever since I've been alive, it's one of those things like racism exists, but you're kind of
Yeah.
like it's kind of just put in the back of your head. You're like, yeah, it's whatever. It's not really a thing. Especially, it's just individual people here and there are bad people, but for the most part, everybody's not like that. Fox did not want Will Smith to be the leading actor. They did not believe people would come out to see a film with a black man as the leading actor. And the only reason they got Fox to let him do it is because they kind of explained, no, it's like Jaws. The main actor are the aliens. It's the bad guys. That's why people are going to come. And that's where the first trailer doesn't show any of the actors. It only shows the aliens. And I'm like, that is so crazy. And this is like Will Smith's first big film. He'd been in
Yeah,
a couple before.
because it was before Men in Black, and yeah,
Yeah. And it's just so weird because it's like, wait a minute, Will Smith? You didn't think people would come to
right.
see Will
Would come to
Smith?
see that. Yeah,
Like, come on.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a lot in here that I was like, what?
That's
I did not know the 90s was like that,
90s is great, man. It's a crazy era, and
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and no, there was well, and I think like you said too, like as particularly as white men and as like as viewers, like we're not as cognizant as of stuff like that growing up, and then but it was rampant, and yeah, and I mean that's not that long ago that a studio was saying, oh no, people aren't going to go see that with a black lead, and it actually is one also just a really diverse cast as a whole, and
Oh, yeah.
has been widely celebrated for years and years.
Yeah. And I think, in my opinion, the movie would kind of feel flat if it wasn't so diverse because it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh, a global
it
threat, but it's
ruins the
only
message.
white people you see. Like,
Right.
you can't do that.
No, that would be completely ruin the point of it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man. Oh, all right. So you mentioned before there's a lot of themes that we can pull out of this to talk about. What are some of the ones that you noticed that you think would be like some of the top themes of the film if you just like list them off?
Well, the biggest is, like you said, a global threat. Would that, bring humanity together? And does that, and like, we've seen so many apocalyptic stories over the years. And like, I was thinking about, and this is a pretty optimistic view in terms of, yeah, aliens invade and I mean, of course, there's still tensions, but generally people do come together. And I think a lot, I brought this movie up on another podcast, but 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still is very like it asks that question, but it kind of leaves it on an ambiguous note. It's a great movie, but that one is like the alien kind of gives this like ultimatum for humanity at the end and says like you need to come together, and there's kind of a like signal that people are willing by the end of the movie to like there might be an opportunity for that discussion, but they don't actually hear. You see them all come together. You see like this humanity really join forces to face a global threat. And I think it is a little, I mean, again, it is a pretty lighthearted B movie. And it's like many ways more fantastical. So I think this is a more optimistic look at, in an apocalyptic setting. I personally think, but to take a more cynical lens, like I don't know that would happen in today's world. And I think like, because I mean, I think something like you look at like Walking Dead and other apocalyptic stories where there are still, even in the wake of an apocalypse where humanity is threatened by something globally, there are horrible people and horrible ideologies will still persist. And I mean, I hate to say it, but we've seen it firsthand going through COVID, which was a like global threat. And in some, I think about that time, and I think it brought out both the best and worst in humanity.
Mhm.
Some people like really stepped up and started to care more for the people around them and wanted to keep them safe. Others took a inherently selfish approach and said like, this is ridiculous. I don't care about, people who are immunocompromised or the elderly, like they're gonna die anyway, blah blah blah. So yeah, Independence Day is a little more comforting of but
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest themes is that. What about you? What are some of the things stand
Yeah,
out
yeah,
to you?
yeah. Well, and to get what you were talking about too is that the film it makes it look like it was just a minor thing where you had a few like
Yeah,
hippies and people
yeah.
who came out that were like, "Oh no, what if the aliens are going to be nice?" and had welcome alien signs. But since you brought out COVID, that made me think of like, no, we literally had a man in the White House saying that this is no big deal while
Yeah.
thousands of
Hmm.
people were dying.
They're dying.
And
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
I think that's what would happen is whoever was in power would act like, oh no, they're nice. They're here because they like me so much and you should like me too. Like they would
Hmm.
be something ridiculous. And the other side would be like, no, we need a real leader. We can't trust this guy. And yeah, I don't think we'd be united for that fight.
As much as I would love, again, Bill Pullman being president and
Yeah.
having this team lead us, yeah, that is
I
it's a
think
nice fantasy.
all of humanity should just agree now that if aliens surround the Capitol, we'll just let Bill Pullman become president for like a couple weeks.
I fully sign
Yeah.
off on that. Yeah.
I have no idea what his political ideology is. I'm just like, you know what? It's
But
fine.
if he wrote this speech, like then
It's gonna
he's
be
got
good.
some. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did that on his own.
Oh man.
Hey guys, Christian here to talk about our Captivate options. That's when you send us a little extra money to just help us along with our project. But what do you get by giving us that extra money? Well, you have access to any future online D&D campaigns. You get extra bonus question content, which we do at least 48 times a month. You can make a one-time donation here of any amount to help support the show. This helps us with our overhead. That includes the editing software that we use, the recording software that we use, the marketing that we have to do for the show, the equipment that we all need to use to help out with the show, and more. So thank you for what you do. Head out to Captivate, help us out. We really appreciate what you do. See you later.
No, I think it also kind of brings up themes of like, do we who is the other? So every time
Yeah.
aliens are brought up, especially since Will is in my life now, I always am like, oh, the other. This is what we're thinking of. Like the other is something dangerous that's out there, is what this film kind of portrays it as. And I don't love that. I think it would have been interesting if the aliens would have been more characters instead of just
Yeah,
a threat. But it brings up occupation. What if we were the ones being occupied? World governments, like what you were talking about, like does the government function together well enough that America and Russia and everybody could stand together? I kind of doubt it. But also, government secrets. There's a lot of Area 51, all the stuff that's what's the government hiding kind of things that are kind of brought to light. And then the one that I don't like is it definitely has a sense of like American supremacy. Of like
Yes.
America is the best country and the other ones are just kind of side characters.
That and even with like the speech claiming that it's about humanity as a whole, it's just quintessentially American. Again, solidified by the fact that Cousin Eddie drives his ship into the mothership and says up yours, and it is just like so and yeah, there aren't really any like non-American characters that do a lot. They're shown, but they're not really prevalent. And I totally agree that the aliens are by far the weakest part of the movie. That's probably, I know this is a lot of people's favorite, but that's one of the things where like I said, I've seen it. I had fun rewatching it, but I was just like, they could have done so much more here, especially with like the budget they had. They just made the aliens so cartoonish and one dimensional. And I feel like there was a missed opportunity there to I know the focus is still going to be on the humans, but they could have explored more. Why are they invading, and what is their, and is there like friction within the, or are they all like united invaders? Like it just it was disappointing that with the budget they had and with the scale of the movie that they just made these foreign octopus looking like 50s aliens. And yes, and and I totally agree that it is like very America first and American supremacy, and I'm not as big a fan of that. I love my country, but I'm also like I know that's still a discussion too about like I think rampant patriotism is dangerous. And I
Mhm.
don't think we are meant to, like, especially as Christians, I don't think we should have like that much allegiance to one country and see ourselves as better than others. Like, you can love that you have the freedoms here, but I really hate the narrative that, like, oh, we're supreme, we're better than others. Like, we have, I'm like, no, we're like, we should like, and it is weirdly contradictory to like the supposed intention of the movie that is like trying to be more about humanity as a whole, but it is very quintessentially American first. So yeah, I totally agree there.
Yeah. I it's one of those, like, even the speech, as cool as it is, as much as I love the speech, it does kind of have this like, America's awesome, and we're so awesome that we will be generous enough to let you join in our
Yes,
holiday. Yeah, you
yes,
can have our independence too. Yeah,
yeah,
like,
and
and
it's
again,
like,
I love the speech, but it is kind of like, I
right.
don't know.
And a lot of other countries have also faced tyranny and oppression and seceded too. Like, we're not the only one.
Yeah, it'd been interesting to remake this movie, but France is the one talking about independence,
Right,
and France,
right. That would be
French
something.
Independence Day. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh
that
man.
would be cool. But
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but for my money, since I didn't get to do the episode on it
Hmm.
yet, Newsroom is one of my favorite series, especially because, like,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
very first
Mhm.
episode, the
Yes,
speech that
that
Will
one. Oh
gives,
my gosh.
that is like, for me, that is like, if you had to sum up my patriotism, because I'm still consider myself a patriot,
Sure,
but
sure.
it's like, this is the speech that kind of encapsulates how I feel about it. Um,
Well,
uh,
and I think like with patriotism, like I love that speech too because it's saying that if you do care about your country and the people around you, you're going to want to address the problems within it too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna read part of the speech from
Go ahead.
Newsroom, because yeah, just like, in contrast, because, I think the speech in this film does a really good job of like, hey, we can come together, we can be united. America's awesome, and so can you. Um, so in this, they're asking like, what makes America the greatest country in the world? It will eventually, he says, it's not the greatest country in the world, and he goes, it. He talks about the NEA costing us money, hitting us anytime it wants. Um, and then he goes to, why people don't like liberals? Because they lose. If they're so freaking smart, like they act, how come they lose so GD always? And he goes, and then the straight face looking to the right, he goes, you're going to tell students America's so star spangled awesome that we're the only ones who have freedom? Canada has freedom. Japan has freedom. The UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia, Belgium, 207 sovereign states in the world, like 180 of them have freedom. And he goes on, and he just keeps going on this list. He's like, we're not the best at this. We're not the best at this. We're the 22nd in science. We're the 27th in math, the 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality. And he just listing all the stuff off that we're not. And he goes, none of this is the fault of a 20-year-old college student, talking about the person who asked the question. But you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever, period. So when you ask what makes the greatest country in the world, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Yosemite? And then he eventually goes on, and I think the thing that gets me, he goes, America is not the greatest country in the world anymore, but we can be. And I think that's what it is for me. He's like, he lists all these things that, like, we're striving for. We're not the best. He lists, at one point, he lists like what we used to be. We used to be the best at a lot of these things. And he goes, we're not the best right now, but we can be. And I think that's for me, that's what I love about America, is that we have the potential to do pretty much anything with just how our laws and everything structured. We have the potential for anything. And that's what I love. I know that right now it kind of sucks. Like, a lot of like our politics are awful right now, but we can be great. And I think that's where that speech for me is, where I identify more with that than I identify with America's great and so can you.
Oh, I agree. It's one of the. I love a lot of Aaron Sorkin's writing, and that is one of the most iconic moments in his
Yeah, it's
career.
good.
But it is because it's like and I like what he said there too, because it's not an entirely cynical speech. It's saying no, we have a lot of issues and we have been great, but this is what's holding us back right now, and we can be, but we have to work toward that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I guess if I were to break it down, and just breaking down both speeches, the Independence Day speeches, we have a threat. We can come together. America's awesome, and so can you. That's kind of how I'd break the Independence speech down. If I had to break this one down, it is, we're not the greatest. We once were, and we're polarized is why we're not. He kind of points to that. He says, but we can be the greatest again. And for me, that's more inspirational than we're awesome. Let's keep being awesome.
I agree.
But I do still love this film speech and the way where it's placed. You know, I think having a speech that's really honest at the moment in the film that this happens would not be helpful. To come out and be like, hey guys, we have a lot of mistakes right now. Like, no, listen, we're being threatened by an alien attack. Let's forget all that and just come together. Yeah.
No,
so the speech does the job.
It does. Yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to the tone of the movie. This is the other where I'm like, I take some points away from the movie of like, I get again that it is a giant B movie. It's more lighthearted and you know, it's fun summer popcorn flick. But I think they also could have done a better job with like a little more nuance because, like I mentioned earlier, you see New York and DC get blown up and millions of people die. I did appreciate that the dog survives in that scene when, like, they even though you see cities massacred, the dog runs away from the explosion because the director has a heart there. But nonetheless, you see cities get massacred, and then in the next scene, it's just like, okay, there's no like sad music or like time for mourning and like kind of like panic. They're just like, okay, well, business as usual. We're gonna keep going and keep fighting problem. And they do it again at the when Cousin Eddie sacrifices himself. Sorry, I know his character's name is Russell, but I'm just gonna call him Cousin Eddie. And I know that
that's fair.
Cast him for that reason. But he sacrifices himself, and everyone's cheering. The music is still super upbeat. They don't have like, because normally like when it's an honorary sacrifice, there's still that somber tone there where like, oh, he's a hero, and they cut to his son in the like right after, and he doesn't cry or anything. He just like he's talking with the general, and the general says like, you should be proud of your dad. He's like, I am, like I mean like he looks down at one point. So I'm like, all right, you can still have a like fun, ridiculous B movie, but also have nuance and have sadness at the right moments, because like a ton of people die in this. It just doesn't feel like the impact of that is felt at all.
Oh yeah. Well, so I told you I've been like doing random research on this film. Yeah. Part of that, it really interesting of why part of that happened was originally it was not it wasn't Cousin Eddie's character that flew into the ship. It was a random Asian character. They just were going to have another country's person come in and like end it.
Oh God, that's
and apparently it just did not sit well with audience reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
This got changed. They refilmed it and sent the stuff back out 2 weeks before it got released. And that was before they had digital copies of stuff. So they were taking the canisters and having UPS have to resend the film out 2 weeks ahead of time. And just like reading about that stressed me out. I was like, wait, what? Oh no.
It's amazing how many like the biggest, most successful movies came together at the last minute possible. I mean, Star Wars, of course, the original, like New Hope, has like so many. It was one of the most disastrous productions in history, and like it's a miracle that it came together. I know. Like, I mean, like crazy. To the point where like the cast was like thought it was gonna flop. I mean, but yeah, that is. But I mean, I am so glad they avoided, because that would have been horrible to just have like a minority character. This is a random like baby is sacrificial like that would have been awful. But
also it would have made this character's arc not an arc. It would have just been pointless to have the character in there at all. Because like
no, and I like that he has an arc too. I just wish that they had given it more emotion there, like, and let him his son mourn a little bit, and while also being proud of his dad.
Oh yeah, there's so much more they could have done with it.
Yeah.
It's one of those where his story alone was actually really good, because he starts off and he's the crazy person in the bar who thought he was abducted by aliens, and then all of a sudden seems a lot less crazy, but he's already had like all this PTSD from the war and from maybe being abducted by aliens, and he's an alcoholic now. He's got all these issues from his past, and his own family, his whole life just thought he was crazy, thought he was whatever, kind of discounted him, and in the end he's finally able to be the hero, and you just kind of have all right, moving on. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I was like,
that's a
no,
really cool arc.
let it linger here a little bit. But yeah, I guess that makes sense knowing that was put together last minute. But maybe if they'd had more time, that would have been a little more touched on.
I don't understand why they didn't think of it sooner.
Yeah.
like
it makes
it's just so weird.
Sense. Yeah.
Oh man, but the there's so many just fun things in the movie. It was a lot of fun, and I try to keep in mind that they weren't trying to make a nuanced film. The point of the movie was, would humanity unite? Mm-hmm. That was the point. And especially now with all the TV shows and other films, and like film has taken a different direction since the 90s. Where now we do expect this level of nuance. We expect, our characters to be more three-dimensional. We expect more out of our storytelling, I think. Whereas at that point, especially early on special effects, and you can look at Star Wars prequels at some of this too, where we just kind of expected cool fighting scenes and have some story so we know why they're fighting, So
I think true, but what's interesting is that I mentioned Men in Black earlier, which I mean that I could do a podcast on any day, one of my all-time favorite movies. But we're doing that. Okay, perfect. Because 1 year later, and I think that's still for having been made in the 90s, it could have just been just a kind of dumb sci-fi comedy, and it is one of the smartest, more nuanced. I mean, they both Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones character journeys, but also the inner workings of the Men in Black agency, and then with the aliens too. You get to see there are different factions and there are different civilizations, and it's just over an hour and a half, I think, and it's amazing how just nuanced, concise it is, and how much is packed in there, and it doesn't feel overstuffed. So that's why I love that movie, and it is that could have been, I feel in the hands of a lesser writer or director, it could have been so much just worse or forgettable, but it is just, it holds up so well and is so good all these years later.
Oh yeah. And I mean, they still try to do sequels and stuff, Men in Black, and to differing levels of success.
Sure.
I actually, this is random, and we'll talk about this later when we do a Men in Black episode, but the Universal ride Men in Black, I still love it.
Yeah.
It's old,
absolutely.
And it's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's a classic. Yeah.
And I don't know how much of those kind of films would have been made though if it wasn't for we got Will Smith as the main guy in this movie, because like I said, they really didn't think they could do a movie where people would want to come out for the main character being a black man, and I'm like, that's just so weird. What is all those Denzel Washington films I enjoy? I'm like, wait a minute. A lot of this is
pushback.
Yeah, this was the moment that proved it can happen, and now I have the Book of Eli.
Great movie. Another one I could talk about anytime too.
Oh yeah, me too. That's a good one. But for this movie, Independence Day, if you had to rate it 0 to 10, everything we talked about in mind, where would you place this film?
I think I'd give it a 7. I mean, it's still it's very fun, very enjoyable. There's some things that haven't aged as well. And it is some of the cheesiness just gets a little too much. And again, I think I even though it is cheesy and stuff, I still think they could have done a much better job with the aliens, both in terms of aesthetically and, from a looking at their civilization as a whole. Again, it wasn't the focus, but they could have done something there. But it's still a really fun time. It's not my all-time favorite. But the appeal is still there all these years later, and it was fun to rewatch.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many of those just cheesy and you'll never see Earth again, and that's how Earth does it. Random lines. And what's funny about that though is a lot of those lines were that was the only part scripted, and all the cool stuff around it was just improv. They were showing how much was just improv by Will Smith. Why can't it Jeff Goldblum and the other guy? And it's a crazy amount of the film was literally just improv. Will Smith, whenever he's dragging the alien through the desert, they had one line scripted for him there. That whole rant is just Will Smith being awesome. Will Smith. I love it. But yeah, man, this is tough because it's a really fun movie. I don't want to give it a bad rating because I'm I love watching this.
Sure.
And for a while growing up, I remember there was a week or two where every day either this or Braveheart was on the TV. For some reason, my dad loves these movies. And if I had to like pick a movie to just be on in the background, this is an excellent pick because there's not a moment that I'm going to look up and not be like, oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
But the plot really isn't the best plot. A lot of the themes fall a little flat now, especially with like, we know the world wouldn't be that united and America's really not the greatest as you're acting. And why are these aliens just attacking? So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of detracting from it for me. Yeah, I think 7's probably good. Maybe 8, 7 or 8.
Yeah,
I'll go 8 to be nice.
Yeah. Sure. And it's like, it's also like when I rate stuff too, I think about it in context. I'm going to rate this differently than I would, a big Oscar masterpiece. But like, but for a B movie at a big scale, it's good. I think it's like it's entertaining. It does what it sets out to do. Yeah.
So for me, my rating system, like in my head, is like it's comparative almost. So a 10 isn't perfect, but it's like the best movie's a 10. So if I'm doing 0 to 10, for me, 0 is going to be like the Twilight movies because I really just don't like those, or The House. And then 10 is like Indiana Jones, Captain America, Winter Soldier. And I'm like, but I'm like, if I'm putting this in context of like all the films I've seen, I'm like, it is not as good as Indiana Jones.
Sure.
Like, I can't.
Right.
But it's, it is still pretty good. Like, it's better than an average movie. Like, if I was to go on Netflix and just pick a random film without looking, I'm probably not going to enjoy a random film more than this.
Sure.
So, so I'll put it over 5 at least.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
7's probably solid. 7 or 8.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we'll move on. We've already talked about some of the themes, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it. Do you think that a global threat, like what's brought up here, actually could unite the world? I mean, we kind of already mentioned it, but other than just like the COVID example, because I mean, like that's one where it's like not as in your face.
Yeah.
Here, you see a giant ship over New York. They couldn't deny that it's there. Do you think there's any point that it's making that you can see like maybe we could unite?
It might unite more, but I'm going to say no overall. I think there's still going to be like, even if there is some massive threat is trying out, there's still going to be people out for themselves. Or it's just going to, I think it would unite a lot of people, and it would be, but to do like get everyone on the same page and working together, I still don't think, I don't know. I think humanity has too many problems.
This is weird. So I think depending on who is president of the United States is going to matter a lot.
Yeah, that's a big factor.
So right now, with who we have president, right now, Joe Biden is president, in case someone's listening later on. So we are pretty attached to NATO still. So I think that those countries, the ones that are like involved in NATO and like some of the European alliance stuff, would probably come together.
Yeah.
And I think what's dangerous is we live in a time that I think that other countries, that I think China would probably be more concerned about the aliens. They probably wouldn't be worrying about us, but they're going to try and be taking care of the aliens. But I'm thinking like Russia and some of these other Middle Eastern countries would almost see this as an opportunity of, oh, hey, while everyone's distracted, let's go ahead and, because, we have a lot of bad actors who are leading some of these countries that are, I don't know. It's not like they're enslaved, but there's like this dictatorship kind of relationship.
No, they're like, superpowers that have way too much power.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at it as like, I think some countries would.
Sure.
But what concerns me is more, there's a lot of actors that I think would take advantage. Like I could easily see Putin going, hey,
oh gosh, yes,
I could go ahead and take this land while y'all are doing that.
Right.
Which is stupid. Like it's not only evil, it's also just kind of dumb because you're like,
it's terribly dumb. But he would be. I totally think he would be ignorant and evil enough to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced there's ever been a time in human history where there wasn't actors that would do something like that. Like I think that's always a thing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we did decide that we were going to come together, how effective do you think we could come together? Like if everybody actually did, like if we just put our imaginary cap on and everyone said, okay, we're going to come together, how effectively do you think we could do it if we actually tried?
Kind of depends on the threat. Like, I don't think it would be as easy as we can figure out a computer virus to send to the aliens, and just try, and that'll work. But I do think, like, yeah, if humanity was genuinely united and we put our skills together, we could at least put up a fight against some um, extraterrestrial threat. And ideally too. I mean, the really ideal would be like in the movie Arrival, where hopefully it's also not, like there would be an effort to establish communication and see, okay, are they actually a threat, or are they, what's the intention here? That's the biggest thing. And like, I mean, anytime that's another thing that's been explored so many times in apocalyptic stories, is like when you have this like foreign invade, is it an invader, or is it just like, are they coming for a new purpose? And like, if we were genuinely united, could we put reasoning there at the force? Obviously want to be, protective of all of us, but at the same time, um, would it be, could we put our brains together too and try to see, oh, are they actually a threat, or are they worth, I think, I mean, because we don't know that, that's the big question. Like, if the aliens are gone, we don't know if they would be, hostile, or would they want to, are they, do they come in peace? But that would be the big test too, would see, like, are we willing to ask those questions together?
Yeah, and I think even if we were working together, in my mind, there's still countries, i.e., China,
Hmm.
who are going to want to keep something secret. So they might
Yeah,
help
yeah, yeah, yeah.
some, but they're still going to be trying to keep some stuff. And I feel like
Sure.
without complete open communication, I don't think we could come together strong enough to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
The thing that's interesting though in the film, where the imaginary world of this film, where everybody does work together and it works out great, it's interesting that it's Independence Day that they're talking about, because in a way, yeah, you're independent from these aliens attacking you, but the world had to depend on one another to be able to defeat, and it makes me think of our independence. So I'm like, is there ever actually true independence? Like, aren't we always depending on one another in order to have any level of freedom?
Mhm. Oh, and that's something too, like from a disability angle, I've written about so many times about like what does independence mean in that realm? Because like I am someone who, I'm always going to need other people to bathe and dress me, and I depend on community, and like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I like having like team of caregivers, and my family and friends, and having that support. And like I feel like we idolize independence in a way of like, oh, I want to do everything on my own by myself. And I'm like, and I think that's honestly a dangerous way of living. Like, we're kind of meant more to be in community with one another. And like, and if, to have like genuine independence, you have to be connected to one another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's funny because like I think what we mean by independence is that it's something different than what that word actually
Sure,
means.
sure,
Because like
sure.
even thinking about it, like just the human condition alone, just like mentally, psychologically,
Hmm.
we can't be completely independent. Like that's just
Right, right.
not reality.
No.
Um, but like even if like I just take at face value, what we mean is that we all have the freedom to pursue the relationships we want to pursue,
Mhm.
to interact how we want to react. I'm still not entirely sure that's possible. Like I don't think we can live in this world of I'm completely independent of the relationships I don't want. You basically no, like I don't
Mhm.
want to be, but because at the end of the day, like let's take America, the great freedom experiment,
Mhm.
all that stuff. I mean, Republicans are dependent on the Democrats in the office in the Senate and the House in order to get anything passed, and vice
Right,
versa.
right.
Uh, and that is the only way the system functions.
Mhm.
Otherwise, what you end up having is one group is completely free and the other one is subject, like
Mhm.
subject to the
Mhm.
other. And yeah,
Yeah.
like in order to have the kind of freedom that we're talking about, there's a level of dependence on one another that even those that we consider the other that we might not like, that
Mhm.
has to be stable. So you have to have some kind of stable dependence on one another in order to have that kind of independence that we're actually talking about. So I think it's kind of one of those weird both and things.
Oh, I agree. It's just like, yeah, and you're totally hit the nail on it, that that word we think of differently than what it actually means, and I think if we really look at it more, we could kind of come to that conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. So all this in mind, we talked a lot about like leaning on one another, whether or not we could become united. What does independence mean? The last thing I want to talk about, just since this is a Christian podcast, and you guys, I lead another podcast. It's all about church unity. It's the whole church podcast, and we've been kind of going through this experiment and talking to people and figuring stuff out. Part of what's interesting is so in the Bible, there's one prayer request that Jesus has that we can be a part of answering. Only one. And it's where he asks the Father that they be united as you and I are united. And, when you think about the Trinity, that's pretty darn united.
Yeah.
And even more so, Jesus says that the church will be known, or his followers will be known for their love for one another. And I think that gets to part of what we're talking about is like the world. It's so actually difficult for the world to come together for anything, even a big global threat.
Right.
That the church should stand out because we're coming together without that. I don't think anyone listening is going to be like, oh yeah, that's totally what I know the church for. Like, I think we're all pretty like, yeah, that's what we hope the church would be known for. But right now it's not. I still wonder though, do you think it would be easier for the church to come together in a moment like that than it would be the rest of the world?
That's okay. I think in some ways, like maybe even more challenging. I mean, and like you said, I would hope to have but also it was interesting because like my pastor was just talking about this the other day. Like she brought up an example of an African pastor who was in this meeting and like in after apartheid had ended, but there were a lot of people in the room who had either supported apartheid during the time or had remained silent, and he didn't want to be in the same room, and but it led to a moment of reconciliation where him and I think it was someone, I can't remember the story exactly, but him and someone else called everyone out on it who said like this is not acceptable, like racism has no place in this, and we have to, and like we can forgive each other and we can move forward, but this has to be no, we cannot have this part of it going forward. So I think on that end is yes, unity, but you can't sweep things under the rug either. Like so for a lot of the reasons there are church divisions, like whether it's like hostility or people in a certain church being antagonistic or someone, like pride, all these things that get in the way. You do have to confront and reconcile with those things and put them away in order to have true unity. So that's something that I've been reflecting on and looking at a lot because I think I used to be more in the mindset of oh, let's just all come together, just put aside each other's differences. Yes, that sounds idealistic in fashion, but the reality is you do have to I don't want to be, necessarily working with someone who is perfectly okay with racism in the church. That's not that's antithetical to scripture and to the gospel. So that's a big part of it, and I think that's why it's challenging. So I think it can be achieved, but it requires work.
Yeah, and I think to a degree we have to determine when we say the church, we usually what we mean is capital C, all people who are Christian.
Yeah.
And I think it's just unchristian to be racist, for example.
Right.
So I think there are some things that's that just kind of puts you outside of, not that the church can't be accepting, but it's just kind of that's not. That is not Christian.
Not condone. So, not condone it.
So that's one side of the conversation is really difficult. And then there's also there's a difference in my mind of conformity and unity.
Right.
Uniformity and unity. Yeah. And I think, ironically, Ukraine has showed us a really great example of this where, and this actually really, you could overlay this to the same thing happening in the movie. So in Ukraine, there's, a lot of Christians who are just war theory, that there are certain things of occupation, of things that by fighting this war, we're actually saving more lives than we're taking, which makes it worthwhile and something that is still Christian to partake in. And then you have Christians who are actually, no violence under any circumstance. They believe complete pacifism. And what you see is they don't stop having these conversations. If you look at the church in Ukraine, they're still having those talks. But in practice, the pacifists are doing the best that they can to help the soldiers, help everyone who's there by growing food, by supporting them without doing any violence. And it's oh, wow, that's That's really powerful. And then you have those who are still willing to go out and fight because that is their conviction. And they're doing the best that they can to help the people of Ukraine together, even though they disagree on what that looks like for a Christian and how to do it. And that's what I would like to believe. I would love to believe that if aliens attacked the entire world and we were all under threat and we didn't know why we were being killed, that the church could have these conversations of, hey, I disagree with you on how you're handling this, but still able to work together enough that we're helping the world more than we're polarizing the world,
Yeah, absolutely.
But, maybe that's just more of a hopeful look, but I like
I didn't think it's good to be hopeful. Like I didn't like, even though we've had some like, I don't know if this would be realistic, you can still have like an honest answer, but also be hopeful. That's vastly important.
Yeah. All right. Well, did you have anything else you want to add as far as the themes or anything else with this movie before we wrap this one up?
I think we covered them, Anthony. I was kind of surprised we could, for when we were doing this one, I was like, oh, that would be an interesting thought. And I'm like, I rewatched it. And I'm like, oh no, there's a lot to unpack here.
Oh yeah, man. It's a fun one. Oh, and it's always fun just talking with Kevin. So.
Oh, this is a blast.
Oh yeah. Ready to wrap this one up though.
Let's do it.
I mentioned before we started with identifying a negative political actor, someone who's a bad political actor, either real life, biblical, or fiction. And we want to end by identifying a positive political actor. You went first last time, so I wanted to go first this time.
Yeah.
And I'm stalling because I'm trying to remember the name of the president in Air Force One.
Oh yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. I don't remember his name either, but I know. Yeah, because I can hear him about.
Yeah, he's just in my mind. He's the president. That's what do you mean? President James Marshall. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I love him just because, even though we don't see a lot of his politics in the film, you see that he's the kind of person who's willing to step up and lead by example and take action, and that's the kind of leader that I can get behind. And it's Harrison Ford. I love Harrison Ford.
Yeah. So, can't go wrong there.
I'm going with him.
Very cool. Nice.
All right. What about you?
Well, I will go for a real world one today. A politician who, I like putting politicians on pedestals or anything like that, but just one I genuinely admire. Her name is Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She's a disabled veteran, and she's been a big proponent of airline accessibility and just healthcare access, a lot of things. And I just really admire her and her story. So she's the kind of person I hope not only stays in politics, but continues to advance because she's a leader worth admiring, and I have a lot of respect for her.
Man, yeah, that's awesome. There's, and part of it is because, and we're going to move on, but the top tier jobs, I think you truly have to be crazy to want them. You have to be crazy to want to be president.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the good actors are maybe ones that sometimes get overlooked in politics because they're not going after the crazy jobs. They're just, more local politicians doing good stuff.
Doing work on behalf of their state or their constituents.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear stuff like that. And but with that, we are going to go ahead and start moving on towards the end of this episode. We want to ask everyone, if you can, to smash that like and subscribe button. Again, you want to see Will frolicking in daisies. So you got to smash those buttons so we can get that video up.
We're going to make that happen eventually.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I just can't get that. It's so funny. Also, if you're on your laptop, also, if you're listening on your phone on Spotify or Apple Podcast, you can rate on Spotify. There's a little menu, 3 dots you can hit, and you can go to rate. Apple Podcast, if you scroll past the description, there's a place to rate and review there. We always like to shout out one of our Captivate Patreon or Apple Podcast supporters. So big thanks to Aaron Hardy. This time, you rock. We really appreciate you. And we appreciate anyone who's considering supporting us on one of those. You guys rock too, and you will get shout out in the future. Remember, again, this is part of our primarily political series. So if you want to hear other episodes we've done about politics and our fandoms, you can hit the link that's down below in the description. And of course, we need you to do one very important thing for us. And that's to remember that we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hello, friends. Are you enjoying what you're hearing? from Systematic Ecology today in your earbuds, or whether it's on YouTube, or whether you're in traffic, or whether you're at work, well, there's another way that you can stay engaged with us at Systematic Ecology, and that's on our Instagram account. Yes, hop over to Instagram, follow. We'll follow back, we promise. We post lots of fun stuff over there, whether they're updates on new podcasts that are coming out or getting ready to come out, or whether they're memes, or we're sharing what other of our friends are up to out in the world. Sometimes we go live at events, whether we're at a Comic-Con or whether we are just hanging out with friends on the back porch grilling out. You can follow us there. We also have videos and reels, like what's in Will's pull box from his local comic book store. He shares what he's reading in the world of comics. And then Christian is going to do some reviews of Spider-Man comics called Spidey Swing Bys. That's going to be fun. And then there's non-canon stuff. Non-canon? What? Yeah, Joshua's going to be reviewing one intellectual property from outside of the canon of his favorite fandoms, or a piece of literature that's a part of the biblical extra-canonical material. Man, that sounds like fun. But yeah, Instagram is one of my favorite social media outlets, and love to engage with friends and family over there. And so we hope that you can engage with us there.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I'm here to tell you about the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network. We have a bunch of shows on AMP. You can follow the entire network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazal Ministry Podcasts, or on the network page on Apple Podcasts. Some of the ones we're running right now are The Homily, which is Pastor Will's homily messages from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chapel Hill. We have the Whole Church Podcast, which one of my favorites. It's where myself and Joshua, we interview leaders from different denominations and backgrounds to work for a full church unity, Big C. We have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, former host on Systematic Ecology. He discusses his experience at seminary and discusses seminary topics so anyone can access the knowledge, which is kind of cool. It's like the book, everything you learn in business school and then everything you don't learn at business school. That's great. We have Let Nothing Move You by Christian Ashley. He goes through the Bible kind of like it's a Bible study to explain the biblical narrative through his perspective and what he's learned. Dummy for Theology, which is Joshua's show. He discusses various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of big discussions. That leaves you with more questions than answers, which everyone loves a lot. It's kind of a continuation of a series that we did on Whole Church, but it's really good. It's really fun. We have the Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. I love that one. If you're from a more conservative background, that one I find will probably be the most helpful for you. Definitely check that out. And we have the Clydes. Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional, conversational method to help us get closer to one another and God. That's just a little review of what we do in AMP and all of our other shows. So check that out, get subscribed, and just start getting all that free content, you know?